I've got 8 o'clock on my computer here, so let's get started. Welcome to special meeting of the Longmont Housing Authority. I appreciate you all making arrangements to be here on fairly short notice. So I'll start by calling the meeting to order and then asking Olivia to do a roll call.
Right. Can everyone hear me? Okay, just making sure. I see Chairman Cameron Grant, Vice Chairman Tim Waters, Commissioners Tom DeBee, Jean Christopher, Arlene Zortman, Harold Dominguez, and I also see Kathy Fedler. Oh, and Polly Christensen. And we are good.
Thank you. Item number 2 is public invited to be heard. Olivia, do we have any email from members of the public that would like to speak today?
We do not, Chairman.
Okay, so we will move on to item number 3, which is the only discussion item on the agenda. And just for everyone's clarification, this is kind of an informational discussion. The relationship between the Housing Authority and the city is moving well, but there are a lot of moving parts. And given some of the activity that's happening, a month between board discussions and board guidance to the people that are out in the world doing things feels like a long time. Specifically, tonight, the City Council has a study session where they will be discussing the Housing Authority, how things are working, the report that we reviewed at our last meeting. And so there are people talking about the Housing Authority. And then in addition, next Tuesday, the council will be discussing the Housing Authority again. And I received via Dr. Waters an email from the mayor asking the LHA board to present at council next Tuesday, specifically on the issue of the value that the city staff is providing to the LHA currently. And that, I think that'll be in the context of council's, probably their general evaluation of the relationship, but the specific question is whether or not, and how the council might compensate those city staff people that are working on this. So because some information is being asked of us, I wanted to be comfortable that everybody on the board had the opportunity to weigh in on this discussion, and that we kind of presented an LHA communication on this rather than a Cameron or Tim or Harold communication on this when we talk to people. In that regard, I asked yesterday Kathy some questions about what the city staff is doing and how it compares to the value of and the cost of what LHA staff had been doing in the past. It was a very short notice email, so I didn't expect a whole lot of information, but in typical Kathy fashion, I got an extremely thorough response that I've just emailed to all of you. I apologize for not getting it out to you sooner, but it does give a good picture in an abbreviated form of just what is going on behind the scenes. And so I don't have a specific question for you other than wanting to have a discussion so that we can kind of more globally or holistically present this to the council probably tonight and next Tuesday. So maybe the first thing to do would be to go around the table to see if there are any initial comments. And then second, I wanted to dig into the email that Kathy sent just so we have a feel for what's happening behind the scenes. Tom?
Actually, I have an overall question. Are we talking about more of a temporary reimbursement to the city, or is this going to be an ongoing basis for, say, the positions that we might not be filling at the Housing Authority that the city will be, I guess, assuming? I mean, what's the overall discussion here?
I'll give you my quick answer, and then maybe Harold can give us some more nuanced response, but my quick response is we don't know. I think right now the city's just working. Everyone's jumped in with both feet. I think they might have thought they were jumping into the deep end, not the abyss, but they're kicking like crazy, trying to figure out when they stop sinking. We do not have anything specific to consider right now. We don't have a proposed IGA. We don't have any changes to the LHA budget. We're kind of, this is just the initial discussion to get us to what it might look like. So I don't know the answer.
Potentially both. So if you remember the conversation when we talked about pulling some of the back office functions over on a more permanent basis, that will be more of an continuing ongoing cost. Really where you'll probably see it in that arena is in the IT department. Some of the other departments, we're not expecting a lot of volume, and really it's going to be more to take advantage of the global contracts that we have in place for concrete and things like that via the purchasing department. Part of the need for the IGA is, so we know that we're probably going to have between $100,000 and $150,000 of expenses in order to just stabilize the IT system so it can work, and ensure that we have the appropriate security pieces in there. One of the things I'm evaluating right now is the ability to use CARES funding that we have in order to cover that. And in order to get that funding in, we have to have an IGA pretty quickly because it all has to be spent by the end of the year. And so there may be an IT piece to this in terms of a, what's the position called? A support position to really help with devices. But I'm still working through that this week. Some of it may be very interim in terms of positions that are working now, and that then may not be working on this in a month, 2 months, whatever it is. So it's going to be a combination of both.
Any other general comments or questions?
I'll just give my 2 cents.
Yeah, please.
Well, I think people should be compensated for work that they have done. I guess my concern is sort of like Tom said, is this going to be ongoing? And if it is, how is that going to be worked into the budget? And again, I know that those are questions that probably can't be answered now. But from what I can see, staff have really been working hard on this, and they deserve some kind of compensation. So I'm definitely behind that part of it. I kind of looked at the numbers, which I'm sure you're going to get into a little bit later, and kind of wonder about where we're at as far as that goes.
So I think Kathy and I can jump in on that one if you all want that information.
Yeah, let me throw one little bit of background just in terms of our current structure. In our bylaws, we did, in a revision this spring, create the position of executive board member, which was, Arlene, to bring you up to speed, that was part of the IGA with the city, that we wanted to establish a way for Harold to be on the board, but also essentially fill the void while we don't have an executive director. So he has all of the authority and burdens of an executive director. However, we're not allowed to compensate a board member. So he gets all the work and none of the benefit. So that's relevant to think about in terms of what we do and how we communicate that to the city. So for now, to the extent there's anything going that direction, it probably has to be from us to the city, and then the city figures it out, unless we make some change to our setup.
Okay.
Tim? And then Jean.
Thanks, Cameron. Just for my 2 cents worth, it's hard for me to imagine where we would be as an agency had the city turned away from LHA as opposed to toward LHA. No CEO, no CFO, 7 vacancies, and virtually no prospects for recruiting a CEO or a CFO. And I can't imagine, honestly, the conversations we would be in. And then whose housing would be at risk because of where we found ourselves. So with that said, I think we have an obligation, both with my LHA board member hat on, I think we have an obligation to say to the city and to the city council, this is the value that we believe the city brought to LHA. This is not only do we appreciate it, but this is how we estimate the impact both to us and in the city. So whatever conversations occur around compensation, that's going to be a city council decision as far as Harold's concerned, and then Harold's decision regarding his staff. But I think we have a clear obligation to make a clear statement to the community and to the council. Here's the value we place on what the city's done. And frankly, we don't have enough money, I think, in our budget to adequately reimburse the city for what the city's brought. So we're going to have to come up with something that we think that respects and honors that as a general proposal or recommendation or feedback to the city council, in my opinion.
Gina, I think you had something.
I'm going to support just what Tim said. I am a little disturbed that the city staff has been working without compensation from us. I think we have a huge obligation to take care of that problem. And if I'm hearing Tim right, we probably could put a total amount that we can afford by the end of the year, from now to the end of the year, to cover city staff expenses. It's going to take a while to get us up and running with an LHA staff as such. And looking over the information, I just got it in my email this morning, about the vacant positions and kind of readjusting that. I think that that's part of this discussion, is to look at that. But definitely we need to put some money forward that covers city staff.
Holly? You're still on mute, Polly.
Okay,
There you go.
sorry, I thought I was unmuted. Thank you. I really appreciate what you said, Cameron, about the city jumped in with both feet. And I think maybe they thought they were jumping into the deep end, not the abyss. I tried to tell Harold this, but, you know, I personally wish that we were not being forced by the mayor to bring all this up publicly right now when it is in such a state of flux, because until city staff does more, Harold and city staff do more analysis of how to restructure this in a feasible way and a workable way, then it will, getting it involved with the newspapers and everything else and the public does not help, because it is a complex situation. We know, all of us, exactly how difficult a situation this is. As Councilman Waters said, if the city had not stepped in, we would be in a dire situation, and 400 residents plus would be in a dire situation. So I would like this to be cast not as compensating staff for this, but as taking, because people are already very, very worked up about giving Harold giving Harold more money. It is to, we already have in the budget compensation for the executive director that we don't have anymore, for the CFO that we don't have anymore. So this is not like, we are going to have to come up with the money. The money already has been budgeted to pay people who are no longer here. And this will help the city perhaps hire some extra people for the interim, or compensate staff for what they're already doing. And we certainly do need to use that money to compensate staff, whoever they are. And I'm glad you pointed out, Cameron, that we are not, as a board, allowed to compensate any board member. And because Harold is a board member, but because he's also the city manager, if we turn over some money, that compensation that is already in our budget to the city to parcel out as it needs to be to compensate staff, that's a better way to publicly present this, because, you know, these are very difficult times, as we all know. And people are very riled up about anybody who gets $5 more than they get and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I do think, as Councilman Waters says, we need to make a strong stand that this is to compensate city staff for the work that they are doing. They're doing essentially 2 jobs. And, you know, you can only do that for so long. So, and it doesn't matter how much money you have, you can only do that for so long. So anyway, thank you. That's my opinion, is that just to, as a board, take a strong stand that this is money that is already in the budget of LHA. We're just redistributing it to the people who are now doing the work, and leave it at that. Thanks.
Tim?
Just to build on that, just to clarify a bit, from my perspective, I think it's, as Polly suggests, it's going to be the Harold's job and the council's job, once money arrives at the city, to decide what to do with it. So I don't feel an obligation to come to a number in terms of how money should be allocated within the city. My point is, I think it will be irresponsible on our part if we don't make a very clear statement about our estimate of the value that the city brought to LHA and the consequences to the city if they didn't, right? Whatever the politics are that play out on the council side of this, whatever the public discourse is, if we give Harold 50 cents more than he's paid, somebody's going to be pissed. And at the end of the day, not that I don't care, but that will not determine how I vote on this board or on that council, right? For me, there's no question where we would be without the city. And of all the people who are making sacrifices in this, our residents aren't sacrificing. I hope they're not. Gene, you could confirm that. I hope our residents aren't sacrificing because of the turmoil within the agency. I don't know about LHA staff and the degree to which there are sacrifices being made. The only sacrifice we're making as board members is we drop an extra meeting in here. But I can tell you there's a list of people that we got who are giving up time from their families, who have just added to the burden. They haven't dropped anything. There's nothing that the city isn't doing that they were doing before this. And under a pandemic, the city can't afford to not do what they were doing. All Harold and his team have done is continue to add to their load. And their families have said, see you later, right? Because they just keep saying yes. So, you know, yeah, I'm fired up about it, because I think it will be, like I said, we'll shirk our responsibility if we let someone else, not on this board, decide what statement we make about value and how much we appreciate what the city's done on behalf of our entire affordable housing initiative in this town.
Tim, how do you intend to get this message out to the public?
Arlene, if I had the answer to that question, I'd be doing something else. Well, you do know, Arlene knows, I've written something, and I wrote it, maybe it was as much therapeutic as anything else. I wrote it in response, or not response to, after seeing a letter to the editor in the Times call last Friday. It's like, I just couldn't not do something. I haven't done anything with it, and I won't do anything with it if depending on how I don't want to give more oxygen to whatever subset of our population brings a scarcity mentality to everything, has a fundamental distrust in government and everybody who works for the government, and sees anything that happens to Harold as somehow a loss to them, right? I'm not going to change their minds. But I did draft something, not on behalf of the LHA board and not on behalf of the council, simply on behalf of Tim Waters, the only person in town who gets to vote on both of these boards. So I do bring that perspective to this, to make a statement of where I stand. Not, like I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with it, and I don't pretend that that's going to influence anybody's opinion. But my message at the end of the day, for those folks who want to slap around the city and the city staff, rather than objecting to compensation, just ought to say thank you. That's my message.
I was kind of thinking through this from the LHA perspective, and I don't want to conflate what council has to deal with tonight and next week with what we have to deal with. But I'm also sensitive to wanting to make a strong statement. Is it too watered down from the LHA side if we take the people out of it and talk about city? As I look at it, we have money in the budget, as Polly pointed out. We've got Jillian's money, Kente's money, plus some open positions. Not that we're raking in the cash, but we have budgeted money set aside that we're currently not using. As I look at Kathy's email with a quick summary of what the city has been putting in since we started this process back in March, I haven't done the math. I'll leave the math to Tom, but I can tell you the money we have to spend is a drop in the bucket compared to the effort that's coming in. We couldn't afford the services that we're getting on our budget. But we're still getting the services. Right now we're getting them for free. So on a very basic level, if we take 100% of what we have budgeted and available and say, thank you, city, we know this is not enough, but this is what we have to give you. What you do with it is your business. It's not our business. This is money we were going to spend. We're still going to spend it for this. You take it from here. And then maybe, Tim, to address your point in terms of the value that we've received, that dollar amount doesn't even begin to talk about the value. I mean, that's nice that we've replaced staff people that this board had assembled over time and that our staff had assembled over time with kind of the varsity team coming in to show us how it's really done. But on a bigger picture level, we've rescued the Aspen Meadows Rehabilitation, which was, on a ventilator being ready to be shut off. That's now viable. It's a $5 million rehab project, which is pretty significant. Hard to put a dollar amount on it, but it's pretty significant benefit, particularly for those people living there. And for the organization.
It's a good place to start with that.
Yeah. And for the organization as a whole, because it's an asset that we now have that has a useful life that extends well beyond where it would have. Fall River, when I lose track of the timeline sometimes, but Fall River opened up and was ready for occupancy about the time that the whole world shut down. And had we been on our own, I'm pretty confident we would have floundered in trying to figure out how the heck to even get people to come look at a place like this when they're afraid to leave their houses. The city stepped in and figured it out, came up with a whole new way of filling up our wait list and filling up our project, and the thing got leased up in, 30 days, something like that. So we don't even know the value of that because the value is avoiding the catastrophe. And then on the biggest picture level, I think it's what Councilman Waters just alluded to, is our residents, hopefully, are not feeling the negative impact of this. There's a lot of burden being shouldered, but what I think is happening is it's happening behind the scenes. And the people that we are here to serve still have not just adequate housing, they've got some pretty spectacular housing in a lot of cases, and we're trying to make some of the good housing even better. we're maintaining the services that we're all charged with maintaining. And in terms of, the mayor's request of communicate to council the value, yeah, I mean, I can't put a dollar amount on it, but it's like that old commercial. An executive director is $150,000. Keeping housing available for our residents, priceless. It's not about, we couldn't do it definitely without Harold or Kathy or anybody on the team, but I don't want to get stuck in that individual discussion because it's a bigger picture discussion from my perspective. Jean and then Polly.
Okay, I'm going to address, since both you and Tim mentioned the residents. The residents are getting, they're starting to feel it. And particularly at AMA, because I don't know exactly what's going on, so I can't assure them. And there hasn't been any communication about what the plans are or how they're going to take place. And I know they're still shaping up. But when a letter like the one that appeared in the Times Call shows up, they start getting really antsy. And I don't have answers for them. I don't need answers for them. I just need to be able to reassure them things are moving forward. In respect to something else you said about let's give a lump sum to the city, I'm more inclined to, I'd like to keep track of where our money is and what we've got. So I'm sure that, and having looked at that email, Kathy's got a good handle on the hours that people are involved, that staff are involved, and what does that cost. And I'd like to see that tracked, simply because it's LHA money and we're not dumping into the general fund. You see where I'm coming from? I just like to keep track of it. I want to give it as much as we can, but I think we also need an accounting of it.
Holly.
Now I've done both. Oh, well, whatever. Cameron, I like your approach because this is also a unique opportunity to explain to the city what Longmont Housing Authority does and provides to the city and has since the 70s, I believe. So yes, the city is providing a lot of services right now and a lot of backup, and the city has an absolute commitment to continuing that, to continuing to help and perhaps take over the services of Longmont Housing Authority. That has to be worked out because it's very complex. But Longmont Housing Authority continues to have an absolute commitment to helping the citizens of this city who are low income having housing. And I don't think, other than this board, I think very few people in the city understand what Longmont Housing Authority does do. It's really incredible. And if people understood that there are 400 households that are housed by Longmont Housing Authority, that's a lot. And both organizations, I really like your positive approach to this. Both organizations have an absolute commitment to continuing that. And if you would tell people what service, I mean, how many different facilities we have, that this has been going on since the 70s, that we're going to continue to do this, to reassure both the people who live there and also the city that this is you could call it a glitch, but it's a little bit bigger than a glitch. But this is a temporary situation that needs to be straightened out in terms of organizational structure and various other processes. So I like your approach of it not just avoiding a catastrophe, but making two organizations come together and be more efficient, be more cost effective. That's what people are looking for from their government and their organizations, that they're cost effective and that they are efficient and that they also genuinely care about the people that they're serving. So I like your approach there. Thanks.
Harold and Kathy have been awfully quiet during this discussion. Even
Yeah, I'm not getting in this one.
not surprised. Tim?
He's tired.
So what I know is that the mayor asked that you be part of the city council agenda for that early item, special presentations or recognition, that kind of thing. That's on the 15th. That morning, we have an LHA board meeting. I'd like to know, will we be prepared? I think this is your intent. I just want to reinforce or clarify that the intent would be on that morning of September 15th, that we would polish and sign off on a statement from the LHA board that you will present to the council that evening. Is that fair?
That's fair. What I'd like to have, if that's what the board is comfortable with, is a letter from the LHA board to city council. I don't want it to be from me to the mayor or anything. I want us to have a statement, and I wasn't comfortable waiting until the 15th to try to hit that. So I wanted to start the discussion today. So I appreciate that we're intruding on everyone's daily lives here a little bit unexpectedly, but that's the discussion I wanted to start so that we're in a really good position 2 weeks from now to polish it off. It can be signed from the board. I'm happy to be the voice that presents it, but I don't want this to be my statement. I want it to be
Right.
the board statement.
Yeah.
Jean? You're on mute, Jean.
What do you see as the content of that letter? Do you see it as saying this is an amount that LHA is going to give the city to support the staff? Do you see it as addressing the vacancy needs, kind of the ideas that you had in this email? Do you see it as looking forward to the development of the full IGA, what have you? How do you see that letter coming together?
The short answer is yes. I'll give you the longer answer though. And I would defer a lot to our two city council people for guidance on what would be most meaningful to their body. But when I look at it, I think, who's our audience for this? The request came from the mayor. The letter will go to council, but it will be part of the public presentation. So, I think we have to think about the larger audience that's going to see this. Okay. So without going too overboard with it, I kind of like it to be a little bit of a background on what the heck the LHA is. What do we do? Most of the people watching or reading this in the newspaper, if they remember what the LHA is, they equate it with dogs doing searches, which is not what it is and not where we want to go. So I think we tell a little bit of the story of who we are, what we're about, the people that we serve, the evolution of what happened over the past couple of years as Jillian came in and helped us, I think, uncover some systemic challenges that we have in the way that our organization has been structured. Roll into a little bit of our discussions with the city about, hey, we could use your help exploring this, which then very quickly accelerated into pandemics and Jillian leaving and all sorts of issues that brought us to where we are today. So a little bit of that background, and then maybe an assessment of what's coming in from the city in terms of value. And then the concluding piece would be, we can't afford the services that we're getting, but we have budgeted funds set aside for the kinds of things that we could afford. And our proposal or our charge to the city is, let us use this money for services. And by the way, we are very grateful that we're getting a lot more than we're paying for. Something like that would be a start.
Yeah.
Okay.
Subject to everybody's input and tweaking before it goes out the door. And if that sounds okay, I mean, I'll take a stab at an initial draft, and then we can circulate that, between now and next Tuesday, with the hope that when we turn on the cameras on Tuesday, it's final or close to final, and we can all say, yes, this is our statement, go ahead and deliver this. In terms of timing, Kathy or Harold, if this is going to the city, when would we need to get it to them to make sure it's actually in their packet? I don't want to wait until Tuesday after our board meeting when they've got a meeting Tuesday night.
Well, I mean, it would have to be in today.
Today?
So yeah. So what
Okay.
I would do is, I don't think there's any way other than when you all finish it in the morning, we will get it to Dawn and as an addendum, and so you all could see it, so the council could see it ahead of time.
Okay.
And that's the only way to, I think, really do it.
Which is not unusual. We get materials every week handed to us, not every week, but frequently at the beginning of the meeting.
All right, so we'll have it ready in advance of next Tuesday morning's meeting, and with the goal that we'll approve the final version of it at that meeting and get it out the door. The part of this is.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Tom.
Isn't it two weeks from now?
Oh, shoot. You're right. I'm losing track of time.
Oh, that's right. It's the 15th. Right.
Unless y'all wanted to have another special meeting. When's the meeting for LHA's on the 15th, right?
Yes.
Yep. Unless you wanted to have a special meeting next week to do the letter, then we could get it more. We could at least put it in the prep packet no later than the 11th.
So defer to you again on this. What's the value of having it in the packet versus having it the day of with the presentation?
I think that it's out. I mean, people see it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the big value. People see it. I mean, we'll put stuff. It's not uncommon for us to adjust an item up until a Friday. We also provide stuff the day of, but it's typically things that clarification. So you could hit it by the 11th. Or unless you wanted to have another special meeting earlier in the week.
So we're capable of doing it. I don't want to intrude on everybody more than necessary, but if it's the board's pleasure, we could get this drafted in the next day or so, circulate it, and reconvene in a week, and we'll give it a rubber stamp. Any objections to doing that?
We do have to be careful how you circulate it based on open meetings. So, A, leave me out of that. But B, we'll work with you on the open meetings piece.
Okay. Well, unless I hear any objections to it, I think we'll put together a draft, figure out how best to get that in front of you all to review and provide some comments appropriately. And then does 8 o'clock next Tuesday work for everyone, or do we want to pick a different time?
That's good.
And presumably that can be a fairly targeted discussion. Doesn't have to drag on unless there's other business we need to discuss as well. Okay, so let's plan that. And then the second thing that kind of ties into that is the overall IGA. I don't think we have anything specific to discuss today, but just be prepared that it's, at some point we're going to be amending that IGA that we have with the city. And
Okay.
I think it's the expectation that we'll probably be amending it fairly routinely as this whole situation evolves. We'll try to do it without a lot of extra meetings, but just be prepared for it.
Yeah, the first thing that we've got to figure out time-wise is the IT component, and then some of the back office functions, and then after that will then be probably facilities maintenance. If you all have a couple of minutes, I wanted to answer some of the questions that were asked.
Yeah.
Is that okay? So it looks right now, and I'm pushing some different questions in. Looks like there's about an annual savings of $196,000 at this point. I saw a different spreadsheet that Kendra's been working on. Kathy, I don't know what you had in the email that you sent him.
She didn't have a specific number. We just had
Yeah.
Jillian's comp, Kinte's comp, and then a listing of a bunch of hours that staff's putting in.
Yeah, the other thing that we're trying to figure out is we also got the 3P loan, which is forgivable. So we've got to figure out how that comes into the number. It could theoretically be over 300,000 available in that. I also wanted to show you all, I'm going to share my screen. I've added 2 slides to the presentation that you all saw, and this will probably answer some of the questions from Tom and Arlene. I can do that real quick. So can you all see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
So the first one is, I misspelled that. I wanted to put this slide in after the vision because I think that's really something that you all have talked about today,
Yeah.
something that we need to reinforce as we're continuing to go forward. The other slide that I've added is really kind of a sense of what we're doing, in that we're rebuilding the foundation. You can see IT, finance, organizational culture, everything that we've talked about, hiring critical vacant position, community managers, maintenance techs, accountants, defining the roles, responsibilities, procedures, structure, and then evaluating leadership vacancies and long-term structure. I think that kind of gave a sense as to how we were moving through this and what we were trying to look at. We're getting ready to head into the budget, so we'll be talking to you all about this. I was just having to balance the financials here and the budget here with the budget that we're doing at the city. We're presenting that budget. I'm presenting that budget tonight. So Kathy's already started getting pinged by me, I think starting like at 4 this morning on this budget and what we have to do. But again, I want to reinforce that what we're talking about is 12 to 18 months. And I think the epiphany that I've had in this, that is starting to clear up in my mind a little bit is, and I made this comment yesterday, what we have is an organization that is it's not a small housing, it's a middle of the road housing authority. So it gets put in a really awkward position because the small housing authority doesn't necessarily need all of the back office functions and everything that you have to have in place. It's not a large housing authority where they have the capacity to do it. And so what you really end up with is we're in this odd position. And when you look at the amount of money and whether we're sustainable over time, what we need to focus on is really those positions that where the rubber meets the road. And then how do we cover those other components in different ways? And that's something that we're going to be working on. So what you're probably going to see is an evolution of the budget. And some of this is dependent on the very conversation you had today in terms of how we budget and what we look at in the future. And so we'll see. I told Tim asked me a question yesterday, and he goes, well, where do you really see this? And I said, A, we've got to keep all options open because you can't eliminate any option. But honestly, the more I get into this, the more that I think unless we can, you have two choices. You decrease expenses or you raise revenue. That's what you have to do, but you want to be mindful in raising revenue because that really is in the rent structure. And so as we look at this, it really is going to be filling those core positions within the organization so that we can adequately serve the people who live in our facilities and that utilize the housing choice vouchers. And then we're going to have to back up into what that long-term structure looks like.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Gene?
In terms of, as we're talking about the picture of the organization, and again, I'm going to refer to your email, Cameron. There were some adjustments to the vacancies that are open and how they should be filled. Particularly not filling the CFO, but putting comptroller, accountant, et cetera. And I'm looking at also what we've been calling the executive director. As executive director, there were two functions, operations and development. And now that development is on hiatus, I'm wondering if we're looking for the head of the organization, that we do not call it executive director. We're looking for a director, and we're looking for somebody that can handle operations as opposed to somebody that also does development. I'm tossing that out now because I'd like to be considered as all of this is developing. We are obviously not a small LHA, but we're also not large. And I think the pay scale needs to be brought back a little. I think we needed the help and we needed to throw money at it last year big time, but we need to look at who we really are. And while we want talent, we need it in the right places, and we don't need to be overpaying for it, but we do need to pay enough. But I'm just looking at restructuring that director position from executive to simply director. Just a thought. Thank you.
Tim?
Just kind of along that line, as I understand the 6 month, 12 month, 18 month, that structure, a decision about what to think and how to think about a position, whether it's a director, executive director, or deputy director, is probably 18 months down the road, based on what I saw on those slides. And then that in that time frame, and Harold knows I'm going to ask a question tonight about what is it we need to learn. What does he want to learn between now and then to inform whatever decisions we make, right? There are certain things that I think we all need to kind of learn and process in order to make good decisions when the time comes. But in that hybrid model, when you see that deputy director in one of those slides, that's a reflection of if the decision were to be a hybrid, then to go out and look for somebody that comes on the city payroll, reporting to Harold, who takes on operations under Harold's guidance and gets prepped, developed to potentially step up if we relaunch LHA as a independent, standalone, quasi-governmental organization, or not, right? We continue to operate long term with LHA being a wholly owned, nonprofit subsidiary, for lack of a better way to describe it, of the city, right? Real different staffing implications. but decisions to be made 18 months out. I don't think we have any, I don't have any intent of thinking about casting a net out there to try to recruit executives at this point until we get down the road and learn a little bit more.
I think those are both key points. And, many of you probably saw the Times Call article today about the LHA. We spent a little time on the phone with John Fryer yesterday. And as we were talking through that, a thought was coming into my mind about what would we as a board have done without the city's help, and what difference has the city's involvement made. And I think simplistically, the difference the city's involvement has made for me is the ability to have these discussions the way that we're having them. If we didn't have that rescue from the city, we would have learned that Jillian was leaving, and we would have scrambled and tried to find somebody to fill an existing role. Because I think what we would be good at as a board is plugging the holes of a structure that's already in place. And what this whole process is allowing us to do is step back and really focus on the core of what we're trying to accomplish and rebuild a structure that makes that work more effectively. No way we could have done that without the safety net of the city kind of keeping things afloat while we dismantle this and evaluate it and then slowly piece it back together. So that's another intangible value to me that we never would have seen without this help. And I think we'll come out of this much more constructed to do what we're supposed to do than we would have without this process. But it is, as you said, Tim, 12, 18 months away before, and that's our guess. Hopefully it's not longer than that, but before we really see what shape we're going to take.
Well, and I think, I need to throw a couple of comments in. I think when we talk about development, it is a short hiatus in development until you can reestablish the foundation. But you can't not develop, or you're going to perpetuate the financial situation that it's currently in. As it stands, and Kathy, if you disagree, jump in. My thought on the process is, if we don't add units and bring more revenue in, it is definitely not sustainable over time without significant rent increases. Kathy?
Yeah, totally. And the housing authority is in a good position where you already have some vacant land under your control. Man, you get down. Sorry. Getting attacked by the dog. That we can move fairly quickly into. It's not like you have to go out and find something and everything, as well as seeing what happens with the Sunset property and the Element project in February. Even though we wouldn't be developing that necessarily, we'd be partnering and getting some fees and some funding from it without having to have the burden of doing the development. So there's that too.
Yeah, and I think, so you have three revenue sources: rents, development fees, and the revenue you get from the housing choice vouchers. I mean, generally, those are the big three. You take any one of those out of the equation and it just spins you again. And I think that's what we're trying to figure out.
Well, and even beyond the revenue source, if you think about our mission, the city is growing. The demand for affordable housing is growing. So it's our mission to step up and support that demand. And if we stop developing units, whether we do it or we partner with people to do it, we're not fulfilling our mission. Jean?
Yeah. Because I want to address that my concern. And Harold, correct me, but isn't there a planning commission, a part of the city that deals with locating vacant properties, et cetera, et cetera?
No, they review zoning.
They review zoning.
But they don't do development.
So there isn't a part of the city that does development.
No.
Okay, so as long as we're not replicating, and like you said, our hiatus is going to be short, but I don't see any need for anything that we're doing to replicate what the city already does. But as long as they don't develop, then we're going to have to. I would rather bring the development process into a more transparent light than what it has been in the past, if that's possible. I'm going to put that 2 cents in there too. But thank you for clarifying, because I just don't want us replicating what the city can do.
Let's talk about what Tony does, because that might be what Jane's thinking about.
Yeah, so Tony does redevelopment, which is slightly different, where he's more of an ombudsman with private developers who come in and want to redevelop brownfield properties, but he doesn't initiate the development. We partner. So, for example, Kathy and I and Tony have been in conversations with the Boulder County Housing Authority on the development of the property they own. We've also partnered with the Housing Authority before. I think there is a fundamental question coming to you all in terms of how do you look at the Housing Development Corporation and the Housing Authority. As the report stated, if we can look at a combination of those two things, and again, the Development Corporation is going to have to weigh in on this, that also strengthens the balance sheet over time for the Housing Authority. And then as we look at it, it's how do you build a partnership with the city to take advantage of the CDBG funds and things like that. But in terms of actively creating, building projects, it's not what we do. So that we need to there's going to be a conversation about redefining that partnership and what that looks like. And part of it very well may be, to your point, that the Housing Authority and the Development Corporation choose to pull it in as one. That's an option that will be in play.
So have we talked this to death enough? So the next steps will be, I'll put together a draft of a communication to the council that will circulate appropriately. We'll send out a notice of another special meeting for a week from today at 8 o'clock. And Harold and Kathy will keep on burning the candle at both ends. Harold?
I wanted to show you those two slides because I didn't want you all to be surprised about, well, I didn't see those slides when you presented, so I wanted you to know that. I also want to say one thing that to Tim's question of what are we going to be watching. We're going to be watching the applicant pools really close in terms of the quality of the applicants that we get. And that may be a decision point that pushes things faster in one direction or another. One of the things I heard after our meeting with you all that concerned me was comments of, if I would have known what the situation was, I'm not sure I would have signed on the dotted line to become part of the organization. And that's real. And those are things that we're going to be evaluating as we've opened positions to see quality of applicants. My gut tells me, based on what Olivia's informed us, is Kathy's rest. Is it looks better, and so I think
it's Karen's dog. It's not mine. My dog's much better behaved.
So as you know, we're going to be interested in that, because if we don't see the quality that we're looking for, then we're going to have to move quickly to find a different way to do it, because and these are just foundational positions. These are community managers. And those are the most important positions you can have within a structure. And so Olivia indicated, hey, they look pretty good. We'll look through them, but we're going to be looking at culture fit and other stuff. And if at any point we see we're not getting the type of applicant we want, it's highly likely we're moving back pretty quickly to you all going, we need to look at something else. And so those are all of the variables. I just didn't want you to be surprised if you're tuning in tonight and you hear me say that, because that's a piece of information that I've learned since our last meeting.
Harold, who have you been hearing from? If I'd known then what I know now, I wouldn't have signed the bottom line. Is that
Staff.
staff members?
I thought it was the guy in the mirror that you stare at every morning.
You know, I said failure's not an option. Failure's not an option. So, but no, I mean that was one of those moments when you go, here's what we have to be mindful of, and how do you build a strong organization. I'll tell you, the folks that are still here, phenomenal. They're willing to work with us, and you'll hear me say that. And we're challenging and pushing. So I can't be any more grateful for them. But I also get their trepidation, and we've got to create stability, and we've got to have stability last over time, or we'll be at the bottom of the death spiral. We're trying to fly out of the death spiral right now, and I think we are. But we've got to be mindful of all of these issues.
Well, good discussion today. We'll roll on towards next week, and appreciate your time. If there's nothing else, I'll call this meeting closed. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, Tim, or